Hey everyone, it's me, and I want to welcome you to virtual worship. I get to do the introduction today because I want to remind you of something that you are very good at, though you may have forgotten. Remember the early days of our faith community when we would show up on a Sunday morning and there would always be a new face or two in the crowd because you had invited somebody to worship? And how exciting it was to be able to share with those persons the good news of God's love, as well as the good news of Hope Palm Springs, this work that God has called us to be about. And many of those persons you invited to church became a part of us. Well, then COVID hit, and a lot of that went sideways. But I want to remind you that it's still in your skill set, and it's time for you to make that happen again. You can do it in a couple ways. If you're coming to the park on Sunday mornings for communion, why not bring a friend? And then after you finish watching this video, tap on the YouTube share button and send it to a friend. Tell them a little bit about our faith community and invite them to watch our worship video. And then follow up with them. Ask them how they liked it. And ask them if you can send them next week's video as well. This way we can expand not only those who gather in person on Sunday mornings, but we can also expand what has become a very important part of Hope Palm Springs, our online community. You know, we've been very creative these past months in ministry, but now it's time to get back to the work of growing our faith community even more. Remember, gather is the first of 3 words that describes the primary work that we're called to be about. So that's my challenge to you. So now let me invite you to center your heart, your mind, your whole self on the presence of God's Spirit there with you. Let's worship together. Let's grow in our faith. Let's grow in our love for one another. And together, let's shape a church.
The Gospel for today is found in Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 20, and reads as follows in Jesus' name. If another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. This ends the reading of the Gospel.
The Gospel lesson ends with Jesus saying, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them." And the rest of the Gospel reading alludes to another reality. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, it can be really hard to get along. It's important to recognize that conflict, at least to some degree, is part of every human relationship that matters to us. That's just normal. And while we've all known what it is to be in a relationship with conflict, sadly, we know too about relationships we've had that have not been able to survive because of such conflict. Stubbornness, pride, an inability to forgive. All of these things can prevent healing and reconciliation to the point where the relationship crumbles beneath irreconcilable differences. So what does Jesus have to say about all this in the gospel lesson? In what direction would he point us as we try to figure out how to deal with those with whom we are at odds? First of all, Jesus says right out, love all people, even those with which you are at odds, like your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. So what does it mean to love somebody? Well, you may be happy to hear it doesn't always mean we have to necessarily like them. Although there is a real possibility that if we truly love someone, we will learn to like that person as well, and that person may even come to like us too. Loving an enemy means recognizing that they too are created in the image of God, and that because God considers them a person of value and worth, so should we. Since God forgives that person, so we are also called to forgive that person and to pray and work for his or her welfare. We hold out a hand of kindness and even welcome risking rejection. Those are God-like qualities. Remember, Jesus forgave his enemies from the cross, and the gift of love was still given to those who rejected that love. But what else does Jesus say? Well, he tells us to work toward reconciliation. In the gospel lesson, if someone sins against you, go and point out the fault when the 2 of you are alone. If that person listens to you, you have gained a friend. In other words, Jesus actually encourages confrontation. Harm cannot simply go unchallenged. But the confrontation is done in private so as not to humiliate the other person, and it's done with the intention of reconciliation, not simply to insult or berate an enemy. Interesting, isn't it, that the text prescribes a deliberate process of escalation with the ultimate goal of gaining a sister or a brother. Avoidance of confrontation is one of the most pervasive problems in modern Christianity. We want to be welcoming, inclusive, compassionate, and loving. And that often means we exclude confronting people for the destruction that they do to themselves, their families, or to their larger communities. Apparently, this is a foreign concept to today's text. because confrontation is a necessary companion on the road of reconciliation. But when confrontation occurs, it should be done in a way that invites a person into relationship, that invites a pathway to walk a pathway of reconciliation. And by the way, we all stand in need of being confronted at times because none of us is perfect. We all stand in need of grace at the foot of the cross. Reconciliation of this sort creates a special kind of unity and agreement, as Jesus says in today's reading. I assure you that if two of you agree on earth about anything you ask, then my Father who is in heaven will do it for you. But notice too in the gospel reading, when that doesn't work or it can't work, that the larger community must become involved. As it says, if you are not listened to, take one or two others along. If the person refuses to listen to them, then tell it to the church. What's implied here is that the larger community often has to intervene on behalf of those who aren't listened to. For confrontation is difficult, especially when there's a power differential for those who have no voice or a little chance of confronting those who are hurting them. It's important that we walk alongside and protect those who are being disempowered or made vulnerable, enabling them to speak so that others might hear. And for some who have no voice, we might even have to speak on their behalf. All this, Jesus reminds us, hinges on one important thing: listening. The lesson speaks of listening, that the offender needs to listen to the one who is offended. Listening is very difficult. We all know that. 4 times in the first 3 verses, Jesus makes reference to listening or refusing to listen, saying that it's important to listen to the truth in another person. We live in a call-out culture. People ready at any moment to point the finger at someone else, to blame someone else. What if instead of calling people out, we call them into a process of reconciliation, that we might have the potential of being in relationship with them and not at odds with them? This art of reconciliation is more than personal. It's a matter of community, for just as conflict affects the entire family, so reconciliation is also a communal event. As the church, we are constantly in the business of healing division and bridging the gap that separates one from another, brother from brother, black from white, rich from poor, gay from straight, and dare I say, Democrat from Republican. The entire message of the gospel is about healing relationships that are broken and the restoration of the once lost connection between God and all of humanity, which to accomplish, Christ had to die on a cross. The Bible reading today invites us to look intently into a mirror and to ask, how do I manage conflict? You know, we live in a remarkable moment defined by much conflict and by polarization. It's important that we confront the sources of brokenness in our personal relationships and in our communities too. And as we do, we provide an invitation to reconciliation. Will the truth we speak in love be the means by which we gain a sister or brother? Or will we use it to drive an even deeper wedge, a wider chasm between ourselves and someone that we are called to love, even though they have hurt us? In other words, when we point the finger, will we also open the door? I'll finish with a little story. When Leonardo da Vinci was painting The Last Supper, he had this intense, bitter argument with a fellow painter. Leonardo was so enraged that he decided to paint the face of his enemy into the face of Judas. That way, the hated painter's face would be preserved for ages in the face of the betraying disciple. Well, with this addition, his work was completed, except for the face of Christ. But as much as he tried, he could not paint the face of Christ. Something was holding him back. And so Leonardo decided his hatred toward his fellow painter was the problem. And at last he took his brush and he painted out his companion's portrait. He then sought out his companion, apologized to him for the attitude he had expressed toward him. He forgave him his wrong. The story goes that in his dreams that night, Da Vinci saw a splendid vision of the Christ. And the next day he took his brushes and he painted the magnificent picture of the Christ that people have gazed at in awe ever since. Jesus says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. And that goes for when we get along with one another, and it also goes for the times when we bicker and fight with each other. Regardless, Jesus is present. But let me suggest to you, though, that it's easier to notice the presence of Jesus when we get along with each other than when we don't. For maybe when we gain a friend, it becomes easier to see in that person the face of Christ. And maybe that's exactly what Jesus means when he says, I am in the midst of them. Amen.
I give to you my peace I give to you. Shalom, 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 my peace I give to you. Give to you my peace I give to you. Shalom, 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 my peace I give to you. To you my peace I give to you. Shalom, 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 my peace I give to you. To you my peace I give to you. Shalom, 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 my peace I give to you. Shalom, 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 my peace I give